Honestly, I am so done with ZZZ. They really stuck a nerve in me this time. I don't remember the last time where I was deeply affected by a character's behavior because I feel exposed. And that's a good thing. In regard to this, I noticed a lot of people quite enjoyed Angels of Delusion's story and resonated with them. It's no surprise that's what ZZZ has always managed to pull off. But I guess someone needs to break it down why it resonates, because I don't want it just to be, wow, that was good, and then we move on. Imagine having a meal but unable to digest it. You never get the nutrients from it. So a great story without a great analysis would be a waste, wouldn't it? I initially planned to talk about this after Nangong is released, but I felt like I needed to post it now because lately I'm at a place where I am seeing a lot of people, especially creators and artists, go through. You make something, post it, and
Hello?
Hello?
nothing. Maybe one like from a friend who's too nice to say it's mid. All those hours staring at a blank canvas, rewriting the same paragraph 10 times, rendering that thumbnail until 3 a.m. for what? Even worse when you feel like you're not even good enough and it feels like embarrassing yourself online for free. And it's quite sad to see some people deciding to quit from what they love doing when they realize it wasn't worth the effort. So if you ever had that doubt and felt the same way, I hope we can go through this reflective journey together. Or if you know anyone who needs their spirits lifted a little, then feel free to share this video to them as well, because if I get at least one person to notice their worth again, then I guess I have accomplished my goal here. As always, before we dive in, let's get to know a bit about the girls, just to keep everyone here in the loop. So Angels of Delusion is a rising idol group that was born from burning passion and, well, delusions. It started with Nangong, a former idol whose agency went under, leaving her to rebuild from scratch. She brought in Arya, a former voice double for the retired star Cersei, who was searching for a new identity after waking from a long slumber, desperate to shed her past as a weapon of war. Finally, they pulled in Suna, whose raw, evocative songwriting Nangong admired so deeply that she vowed to bring those melodies to life. And idol groups are already harsh, even with a company behind you. Like even in real life, especially if you're familiar with the industry, idol life is a survival game. Whether you're in a big or small company, there's barely a safety net. Even if you're well established, half of your fans can turn on you overnight. So yeah, now we get where the delusions come from. These girls literally just form an idol group with nothing but a jar of thoughts and prayers. But what makes Angels of Delusion so compelling is that it feels like the process of a creative pursuit turned into 3 people, and none of them can really function without the others. The vulnerable spark that doubts itself, the relentless grind that exhausts you, and the skill or talent that feels unworthy. Each one is a part you need, and each one is a way you can burn out. Yet their shared delusion reminds us back to why we're creating at all. Let's start with Suna. If the creative process is a machine, Suna is the spark that actually starts the engine. She's the composer, the one taking all those messy, tangled feelings in her head and turns it into something tangible through her music. And when Nangong puts the group together, she knew they didn't just need mere performers, they needed a soul, and that's Suna. The reason why she makes music in the first place is because she wanted to share with people the comfort of delusion she once felt, to give them dreams and a bit of hope even in the harsh world they're living in. It's why Nangong often stated that Suna's the heart of the group, the seed from which their dream can grow and the one that awakened the hope that was sleeping inside her. And because of that, Suna is the foundation of what Angels of Delusion stands for. Within the group, Suna's contribution isn't just providing songs, she is the emotional ledger. She gives Arya's voice meaning by providing words Arya has ever spoken spoken that aren't a mimicry of someone else. Suna's music is the first time Arya gets to perform and be herself. Similarly, Suna gives Nangong a reason to lead. Nangong already knows what it feels like when work becomes hollow and none of it feels like it means anything. And without Suna, Angels of Delusion would just be another corporate style idol act going through the motions. She is the pulse that keeps their art human. It makes so much sense how she's the most sensitive and most expressive among the rest, as she carries the weight of all those emotions. Essentially, Suna is nowhere near perfect. If anything, she's the one who needs a bit more practice than the others, but that imperfection is the embodiment of the raw and impulse to express ourselves before it is made presentable. This is the part of creation where we're all still becoming. We see this clearly in Suna's own struggle. Her social anxiety is a portrayal of the vulnerability of creating, because when you put a piece of your internal world out there, you are completely exposed. Plus, it's not that she wants to gatekeep her music like, oh, I'm just making this for personal use. You can see how she's always insecure about their social media platform being a flop, showing she does want more people to listen to them. However, Suna also wishing the entire audience would disappear is the classic artist's dilemma. I want the world to hear my voice, but I don't want to be perceived at the same time. And because her role is deeply personal, that exposure is incredibly dangerous. Makes total sense why her constant self-deprecation comes into play. On a personal note, she was freaking annoying in that one scene and just pissed me off because I was that type of person before and sometimes still am. Now I hope you guys get where my frustration comes from. Seeing it from a third person point of view makes me realize that this behavior is not going to take me anywhere. Anyways, back to Suna. We know it's just her defense mechanism to the whole exposure thing. If she tells her work is not good enough or that she's a burden before anyone can, then it would hurt a little less when the world inevitably judges her. And for the most of us, we do this without even realizing. For example, we post a video and immediately follow with a comment like, sorry, the audio is a bit off, or I know I'm not the best at this. We're essentially trying to manage people's expectations to protect ourselves. Nothing wrong with that, at least we're self-aware. But it also shows that we're terrified if we actually stand behind our work with pride, like saying, I put my heart into this and I think it's great, and still gets ignored or laughed at, and that just automatically translates that our very best simply wasn't enough. So Suna being on center stage, performing her own song live, of course that shit is scary as hell, especially when you realize your performance isn't living up to what you envisioned and you have to see the audience reacting to your life's work in real time. It's understandable how Suna, despite loving being on stage, would rather just be their composer and work in the background, as it seems more safe and less exposed. When you pour your raw emotions into your work only to be met with the rigid system of the industry or negative reactions from an audience, it feels like judgment. And from my point of view, Suna isn't afraid of being seen by millions of people, but rather she is afraid that even with all those eyes on her, her work still won't matter. And so the tension leads us to fall into the trap of thinking that if our work isn't validated by the outside world, it holds no value. We stop seeing our art as a valid expression of our humanity and start seeing it as a failed product. But we know we can't live in that headspace forever. If Suna was the only voice in a creator's head, nothing would ever get made. The harsh reality of creating is that a sheer spark alone isn't enough to keep the lights on. Eventually, the mind has to pivot from feeling to executing, and that is where Nangong fits right in. If Suna is the why of the creative process, Nangong is the relentless how. As the leader, she represents the strong will required to turn a personal work into something that actually impacts the real world. Nangong is that critical manager inside your head. She's the voice telling you to wake up early, practice your scales, redraw that hand for the 50th time, and actually stick to an upload schedule. But beyond just making art, she also represents the reality of presenting it. Especially since Angels of Delusion is an idol group, they also have to know how to charm a crowd, navigate networking, and build a persona. And this applies to any creator who actually wants their work to reach people. Whether you're trying to build a career or just desperately want your art to find an audience, you are forced to learn these soft skills, communication, and figuring out how to sell yourself. That's exactly why within the group, you'll find Nangong always keeping up with the logistics, handling PR, and making sure they stay relevant. It's evident how she's usually the confident and most direct one when it comes to keeping the group together, whether it's making sure to ground Arya and Suna to reality or cleaning up messes on stage. But of course, that burden of responsibility comes with its own struggles. Nangong sometimes fall into the trap of overstepping. She can be intense, even demanding with the group, though it's never born from ego. In fact, the game heavily hints that Nangong comes from serious wealth, or at least has close connections with the higher-ups. She isn't grinding to be a successful idol for a paycheck. She's doing this purely out of a genuine love for the craft and the group. But because she loves it so much, she's terrified that if she drops the ball, Angels of Delusion will be no more. Even during heated moments, you can see her actively fighting to stay calm, pulling herself back from making things go worse. And that exact struggle is the double-edged sword of discipline and rigid structure in the creative process. When Nangong's voice totally takes over our headspace, the balance is destroyed. We become so obsessed with the metrics and the constant need to get it right that we end up over-professionalizing our own passion. This traps us into another form of creative burnout, the exhaustion that comes from treating our art like a 9-to-5 job. When creation becomes a strict duty, we risk losing the joy that sparked it in the first place. We hit a wall where we have to stop and wonder if the grueling process has actually killed the point of art entirely. And this is exactly why the tension between what Nangong and Suna represent is the core struggle of any artist. And in the story, those two are usually the ones portrayed to be fighting. They clash because Nangong's intense direction overwhelms Suna. On the other hand, Nangong feels like Suna's anxiety is sabotaging their momentum. But the truth is, they are entirely dependent on each other. Suna needs Nangong's confidence and strong will to actually bring their music into the real world, and Nangong desperately needs Suna's spark to give her hustle any meaning at all. Like Nangong says herself, it's both her burden and her joy to keep the other two in check. And frankly, that's the reality of making art. The polishing, the discipline, the deadlines, yeah, it's a lot and tiring, but it is worth it when it's something we genuinely desire. And what about Arya? Well, Arya is an intelligent construct. She naturally operates with a level of precision and technicality that gives her a massive advantage over the others, making her performances always near to flawless. As the lead vocalist, she carries most of the lines, so she mostly becomes the focal point of their performance. In the creative process, Arya embodies the honed skill and polished talent that every creator strives for. More than that, Arya also shows herself as a projection rather than her real physical body, mostly because she is an intelligent construct trying to live as a normal girl, hiding her past behind a cheerful angel idol persona. And that is exactly what the result of any creative process is. The final piece is always a beautifully constructed work, which is the version that is finally ready for the audience to see. Be it a rendered illustration, an uploaded video, or a performance you rehearsed until you lost God knows how much sleep. It's almost a flawless surface that mostly managed to hide the chaotic and painful work that went on behind the scenes. And as they say, Rome wasn't built in a day. Talent and harnessing skill without consistent work is just wasted potential. And work without passion behind it eventually collapses into obligation and empty exercise. You need both the fire and the grind for the result to mean anything at all. It works similarly with the dynamics in Angels of Delusion. Arya's voice would be technically flawless but soulless without Suna's raw sincerity behind behind the music, and her voice would never even make it on stage without Nangong's relentless push to keep the group together. So the struggles of having talent and skills usually comes down to lack of passion and dedication. But is that all there is? Well, if we look at Arya's story at first glance, it doesn't sound fitting in our topic of discussion as it carries heavy themes revolving around trauma and identity. A dark sci-fi tragedy seems way too specific and personal to have anything to do with the broader struggles of an idol group or the creative process. But in reality, her personal baggage is a great representation for a very specific problem, one that creators face no matter how undeniably talented or skilled they are in their craft. And because we don't see the correlation directly, it is precisely why it's hard for anyone else to understand why a successful creator would suddenly want to quit. It is, at least for me, the most isolating burnout you can ever experience. As we all may know, Arya is a tactical construct designed purely for war, built to follow orders and destroy enemies. After being discarded into a long dormancy, she was eventually woken by Cersei's voice in a song. Out of pure admiration, she learned to mimic that voice perfectly, which led to her being used as Cersei's secret voice double when the real artist could no longer sing. She only became the idol we know today after leaving all that behind to start a new life in New Eridu. In the recent story, during a commission in the Hollow, Arya was forced to fight corrupted constructs of her exact same model. Seeing them corroded and violent acts as a massive trigger. She was confronted with a horrifying reflection of what she was built to be, and it destabilized her logic core, causing intrusive thoughts that make her feel dangerous. She becomes absolutely terrified that she is a ticking time bomb and that one day she'll lose control, turning to a monster just like those constructs, and ultimately hurt Suna and Nangong. And that is where Arya makes a heartbreaking choice. Blaming no one but herself, she's convinced that her instability will only ruin Angels of Delusion and plans to leave the group. From here, there are a lot of struggles we can draw between her story and real-world creative struggles. The first one is the overwhelming sense of unworthiness. For Arya, she feels like she doesn't deserve to be an idol because she was triggered by the violence of her past. In reality, we can map that directly onto imposter syndrome. Since Arya represents talent and skill as well as results of our hard work, her struggle mirrors what happens when we let our past failures, insecurities, or even just the lack of a proper artistic background define who we are. No matter how better our work becomes, we remain convinced that our flaws makes us a fraud. Our skill is just a mask, and that eventually everyone is going to realize how unqualified we actually are underneath it. But here is where the story adds more layers. Arya's sudden spiral didn't just occur randomly because she was triggered in that hollow. Within the narrative, we learn she was being manipulated by a viral code, which is sort of an infection in her system, making her sick.
There have been so many conflicting data streams lately, piling up with that anomaly signal. Everything weighs so heavily in my logic core. My processing slows down, my joints lag. I can't deliver my best performance. I'm really sorry.
And this brings us to the second parallel. That viral code is the perfect metaphor for mental illness. Normally, creative struggles have straightforward fixes. If we're tired, we slip it off, take a break. If we're scared of being perceived, we can hide behind anonymity. But if our mind is unwell, it distorts our reality and we start to think that no amount of rest or encouragement will fix us. And even worse, it easily feeds on our insecurities and tells us terrifying lies that eventually makes us stop pursuing any creative pursuit, even if it's the only thing that once brings us joy. With this in mind, it feels like the writers deliberately wove Cersei's backstory into Arya's narrative to set up a shared tragedy. A famous singer-songwriter who could no longer sing the song she wrote due to PTSD after the fall of the old capital. And sadly, not many knew the real reason why Cersei left the stage. And instead of letting her heal immediately, her agency pushed her to keep up the act until they could safely prepare the fans for her retirement. We could argue it's still a noble act to go on and pretend in front of millions in order to lift up the spirits of the people in New Eridu after such a catastrophe. However, it highlights a bitter irony that both of them have a voice powerful enough to comfort an entire city, yet they can't use it to heal themselves. Essentially, while Cersei shows the human reality of mental illness in a creative pursuit, Arya acts as the construct equivalent. Together, they prove that these internal struggles and trauma will completely drain even the greatest talent. Before we move on, here's an important tiny detail to take note of. If we come back to Arya, Proxy proposed the two possibilities of why Arya was suddenly reacting unstably. Either she was traumatized by her past, seeing those corrupted models of her in that hollow, or her logic core was malfunctioning because of a virus. And it's a similar question that a lot of us ask ourselves when we're feeling stuck in our creative progress. Is it the situation that's the problem, or is it just us? Well, as Banyue points out in the story, both can be true. When someone's mind is unsettled by the environment, it wears down their defenses, allowing that viral code to take root and exploit the gap. In the real world, our bad experiences and our mental health constantly feed into each other. A recent trigger like a piece of work flopping, a toxic comment, or a harsh criticism after endless days and weeks of effort being put into it. Hell, maybe the people around you aren't even supportive or looking down whatever you're doing. They all act as the external stressor. On its own, you might have the resilience to brush it off, but when it's repeated constantly, and especially when you're already struggling mentally, it breaks your defenses until the sickness rewrites your entire self-image. This is where the burnout turns into a crisis of identity. And we have to appreciate how Proxy repeatedly tells everyone that Arya's recent behavior does not reflect who she is, but because she is actually sick. It's a subtle reminder that illness does not define who we are or what we're capable of making. And while we're exploring how mental illness intersects with creativity and identity, can we also talk about the common narrative that creativity must come from misery? We have this weird habit of glorifying creative suffering, acting as if mental illness is just a natural requirement of making great art. We treat depression like it's a muse. Of course, this is mainly due to the over-representation of certain mental health conditions in creative fields. You can just quickly name 5 famous artists to give evidence. However, it's giving survivorship bias. We remember the ones who suffered because pain gives a more dramatic biography, and we ignore the thousands of brilliant creators who made great work while living healthy, ordinary lives. And the reality is that there is little evidence to support a clear link between mood disorders and creativity, as stated in a meta-analysis study. They found mixed results, where one of them, creatives have higher mood disorder rates, but clinical mood disorder patients aren't more creative overall. And here's more recent research that supports this dichotomy. When mental health gets worse, creativity doesn't magically become better. A lot of the time, it gets even harder to start, especially with depression and that numb anhedonia feeling. However, when using creativity intentionally, such as to process emotions, it actually boosts well-being. All in all, creativity is not a trade-off for sanity. And I think it's really important to address this popular misconception because it scares people away from both healing and creating. It makes some people fear that treatment will dull their creativity and convince others to believe creativity is a rare gift they'll never have, even though research suggests it can be developed. And finally, for the former issue, well, there are things that are beyond our control, be it the algorithm, other people's behavior, or even the damn economy. But what we can control is how much of our self-worth we tie to those external factors. Social media algorithms, for instance, are essentially built to exploit our human insecurities. They manage to convince us that if it doesn't go viral, then the content itself must have no value. But it's not just about the system. There's been a toxic shift in the internet culture recently that normalizes hating and shitting on other people's work. They will ruthlessly tear down anyone simply because it doesn't cater to their exact taste or the made-up narrative inside their head. And the worst part is, most of the time, they have the nerve to mask their bullying behind the guise of activism. And I really condemn this behavior. First of all, there's a reason a block button exists, and you can just simply scroll away and choose not to interact with it. It's really sad to see amazing and talented people stop making anything because of these people. But besides my rant, you also have to remember that there are also invisible supporters out there. You know, the one that just view, read, and silently bookmarks or save your stuff to their gallery. I am guilty, I have been one of them too. So trust that your work has reached people in ways you'll never get to witness. And this kind of makes me recall that one story about a Chinese user who posted on Weibo. They were expressing to find that one artist account who makes fan art of a ship they like, since they could no longer find them. I might be wrong, but as far as I can remember, it's because the ship is so rare. The artist just thought there's no point in making more because no one's gonna care about it. So they closed the account or stopped making more fan art, something like that. But it is because that post sort of blew up. The artist came in contact with him saying their gratitude and probably will make more fan art just for them. It is a wholesome story actually. And if you're wondering what fandom it is, well, it's actually a Plants vs. Zombies ship. I know it can be really disheartening when you share something you worked really hard on just to be shoved down to the void. And personally, I am quite privileged to even do YouTube for fun because there are people out there who depend on this path as their lifeline. But even then, if you genuinely care about your art, numbers and metrics can't be the only proof of its worth. And that's where you need to step back and ask yourself, what do you truly want to get from this? If you're doing this for the numbers, then own it. But remember that chasing metrics and meaning will eventually pull you into two completely different directions. And for those who have the luxury of doing this out of pure passion, then we have to protect our mindset. The joy of creating art itself, putting pieces together, performing with all your heart out, that is the actual reward. And if only 10 people liked it, amazing. Imagine getting plowed by 10 civilians. See, perspective matters. But if 1 million people watch it, that's fantastic. But again, that's just a bonus. Somewhere along the line, we get so obsessed with the bonus that we completely forgot how to enjoy the work. Everyone copes in different ways. It might not work for everyone, but for me, I see this journey as a lifelong process. There is no endpoint where I see myself perfectly good at something and start producing masterpiece level pieces every time. Instead, I treat my creative work as exploration, where I gain something every time I keep going. Things won't always go smoothly and it can go wrong in many ways, but there's always something I can take from it and improve. At the end of the day, your art is the way you bring your inner world into reality. And that is a process no algorithm or audience size can ever truly understand, let alone define. Wow, it's crazy how I'm just talking about Angels of Delusions generally and went through a whole roller coaster ride. Regardless, I am glad that these girls have taught us a lot of things when being in the creative space. We see their struggle individually and as a group. It does feel like a lonely journey sometimes, but trust me, we're going through the same. We may not have literal hollows that take everything until it's nothing, but the state of our world right now feels no different. Between the economic dread where you can barely afford rent, the internet being rapidly drowning in AI slop, and every time you open your phone, you're just doom scrolling through another wave of horrible news and human cruelty.
Life could be worse. No, not really. This is the worst.
This is the worst.
This is the worst.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And it does makes us feel like our little drawings, our horny fantasy writings, or making videos talking about our favorite gacha characters are selfish and insignificant in a global catastrophe. But I guess it's exactly why we need it more than ever. When reality constantly tries to drain our humanity until we're empty, choosing to sit down and create something deeply personal out of thin air is not just a self-coping mechanism. Amy has worded every reason perfectly, and I highly suggest watching her talk. Essentially, she notions how creating art is the ultimate way to take back our agency. In a system that profits off our exhaustion, tearing our attention away from doom scrolling, for instance, to actually create art is an act of rebellion. Plus, the one thing an algorithm or machine can never replicate is the imperfect human connection behind a real creation. It's why we don't consume art to see perfection, but rather feel closer to humanity. And contrary to the narrative that making art is a selfish act, you never know who is out there, struggling with the exact same pain, waiting for something to make them feel less alone. Your art might literally be the antidote to someone else's despair, and hiding it away because you think it's pointless only deprives the world of that comfort. And just like these girls singing their hearts out in a post-apocalyptic world, sometimes a beautiful delusion is the exact thing we need to survive reality. So please, keep making art, write those fanfics, film that video, post it or don't. Whatever it is, just keep creating, even when no one's watching. Do it for you and the rest will eventually follow. And for the rest of us, I hope we get to appreciate more artists and creators after understanding a fraction of what these people go through. We may not always need the money, but dropping a comment, a like, a kudos, and a share makes us feel incredibly treasured, and one more reason to keep on going. You know, a little act of kindness goes a long way. And with that, I wish you all the best, and I will see you in the next one. Goodbye.